All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Foundational Skills with me, Ms.Millon. Today we are doing commas part two. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing is last week I introduced a book of the week. And last week's book of the week was the Harry Potter series, which is one of my favorite series. And I asked you guys to put forth some recommendations for some books that you're reading right now or some books that you would recommend to someone else. And Yahira was actually one of the only ones to submit something. And she actually suggested Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney. And I know that you guys love these books because I see you guys bringing them back from the library all the time. I personally have never read any of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, but since you guys love these books so much and since Yahira suggested it, when the library opens back up, I'm just going to go ahead and go get one of them. So if there's a specific one that you recommend, let me know which specific book, because I think there's like 7 or so here. So just let me know. All right. And the next thing is last week we didn't really do a do now other than book of the week, but this week I wanted to ask you guys something that I don't think I've ever asked you before, but what do you want to be when you become older? So I think of this in terms of like what job do you want to have, but you can also interpret this as like what kind of person do you want to be? Like what kind of character traits or personal qualities do you want to have when you're older? So how about you just write that down in a quick sentence or two, explain why you want to do that, and then just put that to the side because I actually want you guys to submit your do now in the same comment as your exit ticket. So don't submit like a separate comment for your do now and a separate comment for your exit ticket. Do all of them in one because it kind of gets a little confusing to check when there's a bunch of different comments from a bunch of different people. The other thing that I wanted to say is that it's totally okay not to know what you want to be when you grow up because obviously you guys are 10 and 11 years old and you're not even in middle school yet. So it is completely okay to just say, I do not know what I want to be when I grow up. All right, so go ahead and pause the video and write down a few quick sentences about what you want to be when you grow up. All right. The next thing is let's just like review some things that we talked about last week. So if you guys remember from last week, we talked about commas in the series. And the first thing we talked about is like, why do we actually even use commas? The first reason is we use commas to break up sentences and make them easier to read. And we also use them to help us pause when we're reading. So if you think of the example that I gave last week of Mr. Matthews, it said something like Mr. Matthews likes cooking dogs and kids or something like that. Now I didn't have any commas in that first sentence, so it made it seem like he actually likes to cook dogs and kids on his stove. But when I added those commas, we were forced to pause and actually read the sentence a little bit slower. So the sentence actually read something like, Mr. Matthews likes cooking, pause, dogs, pause, and kids. So he likes 3 different things. He doesn't like cooking the dogs and the kids. So that's why it's so important. So the next thing that we talked about is commas can be used in many, many different ways. And the way that we talked about last week was that we use commas to separate items in a series. So when we think about items, we're thinking about a group of nouns, verbs, adjectives, or phrases. And when we think about phrases, we're thinking about verbs and direct objects. And then when we think about the word series, we're actually thinking about at least 3 different things. So we don't need a comma to separate 2 things. So I like cooking and dogs. We don't need to put a comma in between that. But if I say I like cooking, dogs, and kids, I need a comma to go in between those words. All right. So now that we reviewed, let's look at some examples from the comment section. So I actually took a look at some sentences that you guys wrote with commas in the series, and I had some really good responses. So I just wanted to highlight some of those. The first one was from Janet, and it said, "My mom, my dad, and my sister all went to the mall without me." Well, I'm really sorry about that, Janet. You're not supposed to be going to the mall anyway because we're supposed to be staying at home and protecting ourselves, so you shouldn't feel too bad about that. The next one is from Luis, and he said the Roman Colosseum, the Statue of Liberty, and the Eiffel Tower are all visited tourist attractions. Those are also really cool places if you ever get to go to them. The Roman Colosseum is in Italy, Statue of Liberty is in New York, and Eiffel Tower is in Paris, France. So you should all go if you have the chance in the future. All right, my dad's least favorite foods are eggs, pizzas, and mushrooms. That's from Gracie. I've never heard of a person not liking pizza, so that's a little odd to me, but I mean, to each their own. The next one is Ms.Millon, Mr. Jones, and Miss Satchel are pre-teachers. This is from Kevin. Pre-teachers, I'm assuming that you mean we haven't started officially teaching yet, and the actual formal term would be residents, but pre-teachers will work fine, I guess. All right, and the last one is from Malak, and it said, I helped my mom, ate dinner, and washed the dishes. Malak, you are so helpful. Thank you for being such a joy to your parents. So thank you for all of these wonderful examples. These were all really awesome. All right, so for today, we are going to be learning a few more comma rules because there are tons of comma rules. They kind of get a little confusing, but today is going to be really simple. So we are going to use the comma to set off the words yes, no, and well. We're also going to use the comma to set off a tag question from the rest of the sentence, and then we'll talk about what a tag question is. And then we're also going to use a comma to indicate a direct address, and we'll also talk about what that is. So first rule is we always use commas after yes, no, well, and well when they come at the beginning of a sentence. So some examples of this are yes, pause, you can go to the party. No, pause, you can't go to the party. Or well, pause, I guess we can go to the party. So as you see, we put these words at the beginning of a sentence, then we put a comma to indicate a pause, like as we're talking, and then we put the rest of our sentence. So make sure that when you have the words yes, no, and well, you always put a comma after it before finishing the rest of your sentence. All right, the next one, rule number 2, is we always use commas to set off sentence tags. So what are sentence tags, you ask? Sentence tags are phrases that confirm or check information. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that confirm and check information. So an example of a sentence tag would be, isn't it, won't you, can't we? It's kind of like these little question phrases that we put at the end of sentences to check or confirm information. So let's look at some examples. Mr. Jones teaches math, doesn't he? So we're kind of like 90% sure that Mr. Jones teaches math, but we want to confirm it with a sentence tag. And our sentence tag here is the phrase, doesn't he? And of course, we put a comma before that sentence tag. The next one is, you go to Berclair, don't you? So we're kind of sure that you go to Berclair, but we want to put a sentence tag at the end to kind of indicate that we're not completely sure and we're just checking or confirming their information. All right, and then another one, it would be, you checked your grades, haven't you? So we're kind of thinking that you checked your grades, but we're just checking or confirming that information with a comma and a sentence tag. And then we'll go back to work, or we'll go back to school, won't we? I sure hope so. But we kind of are sure that we will go back in the fall, but we're not completely sure that we will go back in the fall. So that is what a sentence, those are what sentence tags are, and that's how we use them. So I'm gonna go ahead and erase this so we can go ahead and look at the last rule. So the last rule here is, let's see if I can, the last rule is we use commas to set off a direct address. So a direct address means you're directly talking to someone. This is not someone's home address, not someone's direct home address. It's you're talking to someone, you're calling them out by name. So let's look at some examples. The first one is Miss Stalling, pause, can you send me your lessons? So I'm directly talking to Miss Stalling and I'm asking her, can you send me your lessons? Miss Satchel, can you pass me the book or pass me the book? I'm directly talking to Miss Satchel. So I need a comma, I need to pause and then finish the rest of my sentence. You can also put direct addresses at the end of sentences, So here, they were at the beginning, but in these two sentences, they're actually at the end of the sentence. So it says, turn off the light, Malak. We need a comma and the name. And then we also have, you're the best, Yahira, comma, and name. So a direct address can come at the beginning of a sentence or at the end of a sentence. All right, let me go ahead and erase this. All right, so let's say we are, sorry, I gotta move this around. Why do we even need commas? Like, why are we even talking about these things? The reason that we're talking about these things is because when we were doing our writings, especially like our narrative writing, you guys would write something and then I would read it and it wouldn't be, the way that I read it wouldn't be the same way that you imagined it to be. And the reason that was because you guys were missing a lot of punctuation, especially commas. So remember, we talked about commas kind of being the written version of like a pause. We need to use that when we actually write. So on this slide, I actually put an example of like a narrative writing that you might use to describe your time with the coronavirus. So we're going to use commas to make this writing a lot better and to make it seem like we're actually like talking this out loud. So let's go ahead and read it. So I'm going to read it first, and then we're going to go back and we're going to put some commas in. So it says, yesterday I was completely consumed by boredom and I needed to get outside. I went in the kitchen and said, Mom, can we go to the park? No, there are way too many people to social distance, she replied. We can wear masks, can't we? I pleaded. You finished your online lessons, haven't you? Said Mom. Well, not all of them, I said quietly. Morgan, go to your room right now and finish your lessons. I sighed and made my way back to my room. So as you can see, I put in some pauses when I was speaking, but as you can see, there's really no commas here. So we need to go back through this writing. We need to add some commas where I paused when I was speaking. So let's go through the first sentence. Yesterday, I was completely consumed by boredom and I needed to get outside. I don't really need commas here. I could put a comma here, but we didn't really talk about that. But moving on. I went in the kitchen and said, Mom, can we go to the park? So remember, Mom is a direct address. I'm going to put a D for direct address. So that means we need a comma after Mom. Can we go to the park? No, there are way too many people to social distance. Remember comma rule. Number one, we use commas after the words yes, no, and well. So I'm going to put a comma after the word no. She replied, we can wear masks, can't we? So can't we is a sentence tag. So I'm going to put an ST for sentence tag. And we always need a comma before a sentence tag. We can wear masks, can't we? I pleaded. You finished your online lessons, haven't you? This is another sentence tag. So we need a comma before the sentence tag. Said Mom. Well, not all of them, I said quietly. Remember, well is one of those words that we put a comma after. So I'm going to put a comma after well. And then this last one says, Morgan, go to your room right now and finish your lesson. So remember, Morgan is a direct address. I'm speaking directly to Morgan. So I'm going to put a comma after Morgan. And that's all the commas that we need. So if I go back and reread this, which I'm not going to do, I would know that there are commas here. That means I need to pause when I'm reading it or when I'm speaking out loud. So that is why we use commas. We use commas really to just make our writing a lot better and make it a little bit more deliberate. Let me go ahead and erase this, and then we can go on to our review. All right, to review. First thing, we use commas to separate words in a series. Words are phrases in a series. For example, my mom, my dad, and my sister all went to the mall without me. Thank you, Janet. The next one, we use commas after the words yes, no, and well. For example, well, pause, I guess we can go to the party. The next one is we use commas to set off sentence tags. So sentence tags are those little question phrases that we use to check or confirm information. For example, Mr. Jones teaches math, doesn't he? And then the last one is we use commas to set off a direct address. For example, Miss Stalling, pause, can you send me your lessons? So make sure you know all of these comma rules because it kind of gets a little confusing once we start adding more. So if you need to write these down, make sure you go ahead and pause this video, take a piece of paper and write down all of these comma rules along with their examples so you know what it looks like. All right, and the last thing that we have to do is our exit ticket. So for your exit ticket today, I really want you guys to start practicing using this in your writing because when you go to 6th grade, your teachers are probably going to expect you to know how to use commas. So you should start practicing how to use these comma rules that we talked about in last week's video and this week's video to write 3 sentences or to challenge yourself to write a story just like I did in the other slide. So make sure you have at least 3 sentences or a story, including a comma to separate yes, no, or well, a comma to separate a direct address, and a comma to separate a sentence tag. Those with the best stories that include all of these 3 things will be featured in our next video. That is the end of our lesson for today. Please reach out if you have any questions because I know this can get a little confusing. Otherwise, submit your exit ticket in the comment section and have a great rest of your week.